I would say business as a ministry does not mean turning your business into a nonprofit. So first of all, like it is not saying if you're a construction company that, oh, so you're not about construction. It's actually it's understanding that God cares about what you do. So God cares about accounting and technology and construction and healthcare. He cares about how we do it, that we should approach it in a way that is his way, why we do it, the motive we do business. He cares about the impact it has and the way we begin to view it as a platform for changing lives and communities and the world. And he cares about who we become in the process. Like he's still discipling you as a daughter and me as a son to be more and more like Christ.
It takes something a little more to lead with impact. I'm Lisa Nichols, author of Something Extra, and this podcast was inspired by our daughter Allie, whose additional chromosome has shaped how I see people in leadership. Each episode features conversations with inspiring leaders from around the world about what truly defines how they lead and serve others. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It helps more people discover the show. And if you'd like to go deeper, my book, Something Extra, is available on Amazon and through other major book retailers. Today, we're joined by Mike Sharrow, the CEO of the C12 Group, a global network dedicated to equipping Christian business leaders to build great businesses for a greater purpose. Well, Mike Sharrow, welcome to the Something Extra podcast. I am so glad that we can make this happen. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you.
Likewise, Lisa, ever since we first met, a number of people have been like, you've got to get on our podcast. So I'm glad it finally worked out.
I am glad too. And I just know, my goodness, you've got so much, not only from your own leadership journey, we're going to talk about it. You got lots of leaders that you've learned from, I know, with what you're doing today. So, but let's go back. I know you live in San Antonio now.
Yep.
Love San Antonio, the Riverwalk. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Sure. And the Alamo, been to the Alamo.
Was it smaller than you thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit.
Yeah. You show up there like, oh, in the Davy Crockett movie, it looked bigger.
It looked bigger. I know. Yeah, I know. It's a great city to visit, listeners, if you've not been there. So, but I know you did not grow up there. Nope. You grew up in Juneau, Alaska.
A little northwest of here. Just a
little northwest.
Yeah, when I'm living here, when I tell people that I grew up north, I'll say grew up north. They're like, oh, like Dallas? I'm like, little north of Dallas, like northwest of Dallas.
Right.
Like Amarillo? I'm like,
that's so funny.
Keep going a few thousand miles.
Yeah. Wow. Well, tell me about that. How did that shape who you are today, growing up in Juneau, Alaska?
Yeah. So Alaska, have you been there?
Never have. It's on my bucket list, though.
Okay, I'm gonna be the Chamber of Commerce for the state of Alaska. You got to go. It's like one giant national park. It is just, I feel bad. We know God created the universe, and He's a creative God, and He's beautiful and perfect and excellent. But He's not equitable, because the creative excellence He demonstrated in Alaska is just not on par with like West Texas. Like it's a completely different level. So I think it shaped me. It shaped me from a young age of just being very surrounded by the vastness of beauty and grandness, and how small I was and how big everything was. One of the things you don't really appreciate as a kid until you leave and you go back. But there's something about being surrounded by majestic mountains and huge nature and being in places where there's not a soul forever that kind of right sizes your sense of importance and power in the world.
Right.
So that was super, super good. And I grew up in a first person in my family to go to college or do any kind of stuff in like professional business space. And so grew up with a lot of different perspective on kind of vulnerability and communities in need and different things that God has used a lot of that to lead me in my path later.
Well, I love that. So now you've just really, if God like put 90% of the creativity in Alaska, I need to go to Alaska. So I am definitely going to move that up on the bucket list for sure, Mike. Well, I love this. I know that you came to faith at a really young age. You started loving Jesus at a young age. In fact, I read somewhere where you said you were like the Doogie Howser.
Yes. Remember that old show?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
gee. Yes, I remember that old show. Yeah. You said it was all the Jesus stuff. This is crazy to me. You were on the church planting committee when you were age 12, Mike.
just wild. I've got a 12-year-old daughter now. I'm like, what were they thinking? Like, that's crazy. But yeah, no, I would not be who I am today without a lot of mentors and just people who invested in me and grew me. And early age, there were some crazy good pastors and folks who not only discipled me and were, but they started saying, "Hey, I want to draw you into some leadership experiences. I want to have you sit around and wrestle with decision making and things that I mean, I had no business being there, but that was such a formative time of beginning to think about programming and planning and how you grow people and how you reach people and the
Right.
complexity of calendars and schedules and how it got me thinking about organizational issues at an early age.
Yeah. Well, aren't you grateful for those opportunities? Because I kind of had the same thing.
Hmm.
I remember, and I was just a young gal. I mean, probably 14 years old, and some of my older ladies in our church had me teaching.
Hmm.
And, to this day, I mean, I love teaching from the Word of God, especially. I like teaching anything, but especially from God's Word. And same thing. It's like, what did I know? I was I was just a kid, but somebody, I guess, Mike, somebody saw something in you. Some leadership qualities, some passion, maybe, and getting that youth perspective. Had to have been something there.
I had a chance to go back like one I was 16. I had a youth pastor who one day was like, "Hey, uh, I, I do see something new. I'd like to challenge you in growth." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I got an idea. I'm going to take you to coffee every 2 weeks." Okay. He's like, I'm going to give you a book to read, and you've got to read that book before our next coffee. And then we're going to find somebody to go apply it. So he started pumping like John Maxwell books. I didn't know who John Maxwell was. And just some of these like classic Oswald Chambers and just different books. And then I'd read a book and he'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to have you go do that." And he'd make me go teach a class or go practice something or go present something. And I look back and that was such great equipping about, gosh, 2009, my favorite trip I did. My wife and I went back to Alaska, and I looked up so many of those mentors, Sunday school teachers, small
Oh,
group leaders, neighbors, and just told them, "Hey, here's what you did for me, and here's what God did with that." And I would say, like,
yes.
today as an adult, I'm still looking back at that lesson. And half of them were like, "Aw, shucks, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a playbook. I hope I didn't mess you up too bad." Like, it was not like they were these mastermind, brilliant mentors.
Mhm.
Yes, they
Yeah.
leaned in, invested, and God did great things with this. So
Yeah.
I love getting to go honor those
That
folks who just took a risk.
that's a great word right there, Mike. To do that for people that have invested in you, go back and say thank you, even if it's a letter to them
Yes.
or something, right? So important. But then also, I just think it's a great word for us
Mhm.
as we are mentoring the next generation.
Yep.
And when you see something in somebody, invest in them. And you just never know. I mean, I was talking to somebody last week and they said, um, talking about just kind of being led by the Spirit, and said that they had said something to somebody and they didn't even know what they had said. They didn't even know what they had said, but the person came back and said, "Wow, when you said this," and they said, "I don't even remember saying that." But it's when you're walking in the Spirit, God speaking through you.
And do it whether. So I had a mentor years ago, um, who said, "Hey, we've got these people in our lives, family, friends, neighbors, maybe former bosses, coworkers. If you would show up at their funeral and say something, why not go tell them while they're alive? Like, why not? Why wait to funerals to give people the eulogy of here's what you meant to me and here's what I learned from you?" And he said, even I don't even argue, miss the funeral, go do it now. Like, so much more to go tell them today. And so I took that to heart. And even just this last Friday, you and I've talked a lot about your passion for people in your business and
Yes.
organizational development. So we had an employee reach his 5-year anniversary, and so we do this um, 2-hour lunch, get teams all together, give them some awards and gifts, all that kind of stuff. But the real powerful part is we spend a meaningful bit of time going around saying, "Hey, here's what we see in you. Here's what you've done in this place. Here's what we appreciate about you. Here's how you've impacted us individually or collectively." And there's just this moment. It's like a living funeral, and inevitably that person's crying. receiving things that they didn't even realize they'd done.
Right.
Such a
Right.
spiritual gift to speak value and worth to someone to their face while they're still here and go, hey, 4 years ago when I was a new employee and you said this to me, you helped me be successful. I think we don't do enough of that.
I agree, Mike. I could not agree more. I call it words of life.
Yes.
And you just never know. I mean, not only I've seen it not only change a day, it can change the trajectory of someone's life and what they believe about themselves. So I love that. We could spend a whole podcast just talking about that. But I told you I've got 4 pages of
That's right.
questions.
Sorry. I'm hijacking.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, yeah, so you got licensed as a Southern Baptist pastor at the age of 17. But you did go on to college and you
Yep.
went to Chicago, and I'm so glad you did
Mhm.
because you met your lovely wife Jackie there at
That's how they
Trinity.
wrote. Yep.
Best thing about going to Trinity, right?
Mhm.
So you've had both marketplace because I think I don't know how long you spent there, but I know that you worked at Walgreens, and so you spent some time in corporate,
Yep.
and also in pastoral roles. I mean, which tell me about each of those seasons and what kinds of things that those seasons taught you.
Yeah. Um, it's my confusion in college that led me to kind of a staccato career stuff was just knowing like I love Jesus, but I was really good at business and just wrestling with what to do with those two things. And so was super involved in volunteering in my church and doing things like that. But got to work for the Walgreens Corporation, which is fantastic. So about 8 years with them as we built up some subsidiaries in the world of managed healthcare and kind of corporate consulting stuff. And man, that was powerful for just me growing up as a professional. Learned a
Yeah.
ton, had all sorts of bosses, mostly good. All sorts of experiences just grew me. And I really had to wrestle with my identity. Like that's where I really wrestled with, does my vocation, does the logo on my shirt define my identity? Or does my identity in Christ transform wherever I work? And how could I understand how to be fully who I am no matter where I'm working?
Mhm.
That was a huge wrestling for me in that place. Um, Helped someone with a financial services startup company for a few years and did stuff like audit financial pension plans and retirement planning. So that was not my favorite, but learned a lot about
But
stuff.
you learned a lot.
Learned a lot. Sometimes, I had a boss once who said, I want you to go do this job, not because it's what you'll want to do for the rest of your life, but it'll be a really good learning experience. You need to go learn that part of the business.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
sometimes
I
people got to do those things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that. And I always say it may not be the most favorite thing that you're doing, but you learn from it, right? And I believe it's kind of like a snowball, right, Mike? It's like you get this skill and put that skill in your toolbox. I started out as an accountant, corporate accountant, and had
You
an
do
account.
not strike me as an accountant.
Mike, I'm telling you, I loved the company. I worked for McDonnell Douglas, and I
Mhm.
was in internal audit and cost accounting. And after about 5 years, I'm like, ooh, I do not see myself. I could do it, but I had no passion, right?
Yeah.
And can't really see myself doing that. But I laugh and tell young people all the time when I'm talking to young people, I'm like, there were no assessments when I was going through school. There were no Myers Briggs, there were no strength finders, there were no Harrison assessments, there was nothing.
Yeah.
And I said, take those assessments. Everyone that is gifted to you, take it.
Oh
DISC,
my gosh.
because you just learn so much about yourself, right? And yeah, so I think it's really important, but I love like, your thing about the financial and not really enjoying it, but I'm just also thinking, Mike, and this is what I want to get into right now and what you're
Mhm.
doing.
Okay.
Want to talk to our listeners about the company or the organization that you're part of now. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking, you know what? You were all of those experiences, I believe, were perfectly preparing you for what you're doing today.
Oh, I mean, I saw
No doubt about it.
no doubt. God's story always makes so much more sense in retrospect than it does when you're walking through it. Walking through it,
Yes.
like, where am I going? What does this do? And I fully believe God does not waste anything. I believe God redeems all those experiences. I vividly remember being in meetings or projects or roles where I was like, is this my life? Why am I here? I don't want to be doing this rest of my life. And then 10 years later going, oh, I get to use that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I've had 19 jobs and only two or three of them were jobs like I wanted, like, oh, that's where I want to go. The rest were, paid the bills or was just kind of the next step or whatever.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
then I get to today and go, wow, that eclectic mix of things was so skill building and forming and gave me so many perspectives and things to help me today. God really knows what he's doing.
He does. He does. He has a plan. He has a plan. We just got to trust the plan more. But you were actually a member of this organization
Yep.
because you were in the corporate world and
Yep.
you were a member. And the organization I'm referring to is C12. And for our listeners that are not familiar with C12, you can maybe tell just a little bit of the history with Buck.
Sure.
You guys have been around, what'd you say, 33 years?
Yeah. I started in 1992.
1992. And I think, gosh, I could be wrong on this, but I think you're in 175 metros now, at least 35 states, 3 continents, 7 countries.
5 continents, 9 countries, but who's counting?
9 countries. Okay. And then I don't know, maybe 5,000 members, something like that.
Just about.
Which represent, which is blows my mind, 1 million employees, a million plus employees, which is just crazy. But tell us a little bit more about C12. And I always liken it. I always say it's like the faith version of like a Vistage,
Yep.
you know, or a young presence organization. But tell us more about it. How did it start? Tell us just a little bit about Buck, because I've never met Buck, but I've read some things and he seems like quite the character.
He's amazing. Yeah. So Buck Jacobs founded it in 1992. It was an experimental thing called the C12 Group. That's where the brand came from. And essentially, he had built chemical businesses, done a bunch of different things, and done some nonprofit work. And some friends of his in Florida were going, man, at some point you and I were talking before, Lisa, you can only be part of so many things, right?
Yes.
And so a couple of them were like, man, okay, I'm in my industry group for my technical space. If you're a
Right.
home builder groups, you're in technology, there's tech groups, auto dealerships, and then a number of them were in Vistage or YPO or these professional CEO masterminds, which are fantastic for best practices and learning how to scale your business and dealing with the isolation of being a CEO. But then they're involved in all these ministry projects and mission committees and how do you reach your city and BSF? And someone's like, man, I wish I could consolidate. What if you had a group that was like Vistage in terms of for qualified CEOs and owners, but had a biblical worldview anchored into it and had an emphasis of doing ministry through our business and held us accountable and pressed into how I'm doing as actually a follower of Christ in the middle of leading business. Could we bake all that together? And they said, Buck, we think you could do it. So he said he would do it, did an experiment and said, let's try it. And at the end, say, does it actually grow people professionally, personally, spiritually, and does it make a difference in the world?
Mm-hmm.
So he began growing it, leading it, and it was so impactful there in Florida. People started saying, can you replicate that? So then he had to figure out how to scale the business. So it wasn't really, he didn't plan on starting a business in his mid-50s. That's how old he is when he started.
Yeah.
But he realized God was calling him to. So fast forward, 2010, I got invited to a group, as you mentioned, as a member.
Yes.
And then became a chair. And what the business is essentially he created a format of creating in-person roundtables for business owners and CEOs who are Christians to really work on how do you build a great business, like a really good business that glorifies God, but do it for a greater purpose, one that's impacting lives and people in the community, and with high rates of accountability for how we do following Jesus in the middle of all that. And he does it with full-time chairs. So these are men and women who were typically former CEOs themselves who then come and run groups in cities all around the world. And they meet for a full day each month to work on learning and growing and accountability. And so I found myself at a table, not even realizing how much I needed it.
Yes.
It was to grow me as a leader, change me as a person. And then I actually left what I was doing to become a full-time chair. And then we're a for-profit enterprise. I bought the local market, was leading that. And then about 10 years ago, the parent company was on its second CEO, going through a succession process. And by God's grace, because I literally, when it came down like the final 3 candidates, I was literally like the least educated, youngest, least qualified candidate. But somehow I got picked to lead it. And so it's the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, again, I mean, if you had not gone through everything that you've gone through, like you wouldn't be able to understand these leaders in the marketplace. First of all, you wouldn't have the business acumen. You definitely have the spiritual maturity. And I think about Buck too, and so in his mid-50s, he founded this.
Total risk. I mean, he went all in.
Yeah. But God was preparing him too, Mike,
Yep.
to take on the task. So I really love that. Well, I mean, I guess this is kind of, at some juncture, you realized that the sacred and secular divide doesn't have to be there, you
That's right.
know. And why do you think leaders? I mean, a lot of leaders still live, and sometimes I struggle. I
Mhm.
mean, with it, but why do you think leaders live with this divide today, where it's like this is what I do on Sunday, but then, like I've heard you say, sometimes leaders have a hard time connecting Sunday to Monday.
Yeah. When I first became aware of my own crisis in this area, I really wrestled because I had great churches and pastors, and I was like, no one ever sat me down and said, Mike, separate your life. Like I never was told bad theology,
Mhm.
but I think we just had this. I think we in America we grew up in it, particularly in the more recent era of you just kind of separate. Don't bring your religion to work, don't bring politics to work. Like kind of keep things separate. Which people confuse like separation of church and state as though that
Yes.
should be separation of like work and faith, and then it kind of compartmentalizes your whole life. It creates like a schizophrenia where you're. I remember I had a
Yeah.
non-Christian coworker where I was working at Walgreens who one day said, "Hey, do you judge your religion, Mike, by what you do on Sunday or by how you are on Thursday? Like, which one do you judge your Christianity by?" And I was like, "What?" And it was a genuine. He's like, "I'm just asking the question." And I was like, "Well, if I'm honest, I think I judge my Christianity by I'm a pretty good
Yeah.
Christian. I go to church and I teach and I give, but probably the authentic test of my spiritual maturity is how I'm leading on Thursday with technology problems and accounting
Yeah.
issues and people issues." And so um, it just becomes normal. And most pastors don't come out of a business background, so they oftentimes don't
Right.
speak to the person with business application.
Mhm.
So you can kind of live in the suspended animation where we know don't do bad things and
Mhm.
be moral, be virtuous, but we kind of view like Jesus stuff as what you do in evenings and weekends.
Yeah.
And yet I go back, like I've reread the Bible over and over again, and you now realize, man, most of the characters in the Bible were not priests. Most of the people in the Bible were leaders. They ran businesses, they were government
Oh,
leaders, they had
yes.
executive responsibility. Jesus did most of his teachings during business hours and business places. Like the
Jesus
temple
himself is a carpenter.
yeah, he had a job for most of his life. Like he did a
Right.
3 year stint in ministry, but the rest of it was
Yes.
construction. So
Yes.
I think it's biblically and historically normative, but man,
Mhm.
most of us, even and I think even down to like when you do high school graduations at like a church, if they do a youth
Yeah.
ministry celebration, we sometimes celebrate kids have been like which kids are called to ministry, and if you
Mhm.
didn't get called to ministry, then you're just well go get a job and help fund those people who are doing stuff. And so I think we kind of create this like two class Christianity without meaning to.
Right. Well, that's a perfect segue. Thank you for setting me up.
You're welcome. Where are we going next?
Because you cite Charles
Mhm,
Spurgeon,
mhm,
uh, famous pastor, right? Evangelist who said every Christian is either a missionary or an imposter.
mhm.
You don't have an option
That's
not
right.
to be a missionary if you're a Christian. So the business, so talk about this, and then we do need to take a quick break because you said it a little earlier. How can we create businesses for a greater purpose,
Yep.
right? But you guys call it business as ministry. Bam.
Yep.
Um, for somebody who's hearing business as ministry for the first time, how would you describe it to them, Mike?
I would say business as a ministry does not mean turning your business into a nonprofit. So first of all, like
Yeah.
it is not saying if you're a construction company that so you're not about construction. It's understanding that God cares about what you do. So God cares about accounting and technology and construction and healthcare. He cares about how we do it, that we should approach it in a way that is his way, why we do it, the
Mhm.
motive we do business. He cares about the
Yes.
impact it has and the way we begin to view it as a platform for changing lives and communities and the world. And he cares about who we become in the process. Like he's still discipling you as a daughter and me as a son to be more and more like Christ. And so business as a ministry is realizing it's not like I do business so that I can do ministry or I do business so it funds ministry, though
Mhm.
all that's great. The process of my daily job is actually my context for ministry. The people I've got, the
Mhm.
families I've got. Like when you begin to think about the influence you have, Lisa, through your business, like hundreds of employees. You got your vendors, you got your suppliers, your employees got families, you got all your customers. Like you have a huge, huge platform.
Right.
That's your ministry. And how do we steward
It
it
is.
and do it well?
Yeah. I did a talk last week, Mike, and to some faith-filled businesswomen, and I talked about, that it's sacred influence. We have sacred when we have Jesus living inside of us and the Holy Spirit living inside of us, it's sacred. So every Zoom room, every board meeting, everything is sacred because the Holy Spirit's there. And it just really, I don't know, when you look at it that way, that it's more than just, like you said, profit. It's more than that. I mean, it just changes the way you think about it. And I don't know. That's what gets me up in the mornings.
I was just telling someone this morning, a private equity guy out of Dallas, about this very story. A pastor kind of changed my life. I think 2006. He preached right before Easter on this. It's called the Shema in the New Testament, where Jesus, when he was asked, like, what's the greatest commandment of all the commandments, he said, love the Lord your God with
Yeah.
all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and love your neighbors yourself. And it's an old Jewish prayer that he would have probably prayed. And his challenge to everyone in the church was, hey, what if this week, before every meeting, at the top of every hour, if you just ask yourself, God, I want to love you with my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love my neighbors myself as I go into this podcast with Lisa. And then afterwards go, God, hey, where did I not love you with my heart, mind, soul, strength? And did I really love my neighbor?
Mhm.
I wrote on a 3x5 card and I just took the challenge. And man, it was so convicting to go into some meetings going like,
Mhm.
how do I love God and love people in this meeting? And sometimes I walk in meetings and be like, that's not my neighbor. I don't really want to love that person.
Yeah.
And it made my
Right.
business day job be really like a dojo of my discipleship. Like it was constant
Yeah.
working out of my salvation. So I think it's a
Mhm.
game changer when
Yeah.
you connect those two worlds.
It does. It does. Yeah, and I've often said I love that. I choose a word or a mantra every year, and in 2021 I chose love
Mm.
more because I said those are the two greatest commandments. I need to learn to do it
Mm.
better. And the thing about it is, it's like it really does make you start to think, okay, how can I show this person love? And also, I mean, Mike, it's like when people think about the scripture, there's like, I don't know, 630 different commandments or something
Mhm.
like that in totality between the Old and New Testament. And I'm like, sometimes that can be really overwhelming to people. But if you just do those two things, you're
Mhm.
good because those are the two greatest commandments, right? So I love that you brought that up. But we do need to take a quick break. I got a lot more
Okay.
questions for you, Mike. But we'll be back with my friend Mike Sharrow on the Something Extra podcast.
Hey there. In a challenging business climate like this, savvy leaders look to technology to find an edge. This can mean the difference between staying ahead of the curve or playing catch-up. It's time to collaborate with the highly skilled experts at Technology Partners. Our team of technologists draws upon decades of experience for your project, with each bringing a passion for solving problems and a track record of success. How can we help you overcome your biggest technology challenges? Visit technologypartners.net to book a free consultation with one of our leaders.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Mike Sharrow. We have been having so much fun here. So, Mike, we just talked about this business as a mission. So, if every believer is on a mission and you're on a mission at work, what does that really look like on a Tuesday afternoon? Give me a story. I mean, I'm sure the cool thing about you, and I mean, we could probably do a 10-hour podcast on this. You are working with so many leaders, and I know you got stories. I know you got stories, Mike. And so, what does that give me? Like one story about what that looks like on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and actually honor, talking to the beginning of the program about mentors and such. I was working in
Yes.
Chicago, and I had a boss who he'd worked at Apple Computers and Xerox, and he had this big tech background. He came to work for our division, and he was really the first time I saw a strong Christian authentically living out their faith at work. And in fact, he one day told me, Mike, you're overcomplicating it. Just focus on like loving Jesus and excellence in your work moment by moment, and you're going to watch ministry stuff happen. And I was at a meeting where we were honoring a salesperson who's retiring after like 35 years. and they asked Tony, would he say something? And even something as simple as Tony going like, well, hey, if I'm going to speak words of life about this person, I want an honest person, then I don't want to just give them like what I think, some Tony words. Like I want to speak words that are really life and really truth. And for me, I get those words from the Bible. And so he's like, I'd like to share some things from the book of Proverbs that you embodied, and I'd like to share some verses here. And he literally spoke scripture about this guy in this big corporate room, non-believers, but did it in such a gracious way. He injected truth. And then I watched him go from that into another meeting that I was in where it was a high stakes decision meeting. And he went, hey folks, I don't know where you are all at religiously, spiritually, but the stakes are so high in this meeting. I just like to pray for myself that I would actually have wisdom to lead well, because you're going to affect livelihoods for tons of people. So if you don't mind just a moment of silence, I'm going to pray. And he has prayed to the God of the universe and said, God, I need you to give me wisdom to lead your people, sort of your resources well. And he did it without judgment. It wasn't show. It was just authentic. And he created a ministry moment in a sales planning meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like that Tuesday afternoon with Tony, I got to watch him in honoring somebody actually speak truth. I got to watch him in a sales meeting where then when we were wrestling with how to do
some tough stuff,
sneaky
right?
contracting, he went, hey, I want us to stand for integrity. And I don't want us to do anything in a contract with the customer that we wouldn't put on broad dead, put daylight on that thing, make a headline about that. Like we're not going to do any kind of shady stuff just to make a buck. And listen, I'm going to stand for truth. I'm not going to let us practice. And when people went, well, in our industry, everyone does these kind of like shady clauses that create some advantage. He went, no, we're going to be above reproach. And what they didn't know is he was actually applying biblical principles to our sales and pricing process. And all those bringing ministry into work.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. It just reminds me, as you were talking, I'm thinking, oh, well, that was Solomon, right? God said you can have anything, and he said wisdom, because he knew he was getting ready to lead, and he needed that. So to lead well, that's so good. And we've already talked about doing business for the greater purpose. Have you seen like a mindset shift, Mike, that really unlocks purpose for a business leader? What is that mindset shift that happens for them to really unlock in thinking about business for a greater purpose?
I think some of the things they have to unlock, for too long, you've probably read the book Halftime by Bob Buford.
Love Halftime. Yes, Bob Buford.
Amazing case study on a deceased leader and his own journey of kind of building just classic worldly success and having a crisis that kind of crystallized clarity of what matters. I'm going to live for significance. But so many people kind of take his description and turn it into a prescription, that there's maybe just a period of your life where you live for success and you hope you get enough of it. You can then pivot and do significance.
Be something significant.
That was not his prescription. That was just his description. And so I think too many people live with this sense of, I need to be a good person, be moral, and then one day I'll get to do stuff that really, really matters. But that's not today. And so it's this suspended animation, and I don't believe that any of us are, on the reserve bench for impact. And so I think wrestling with the fact that Ephesians 2:10 says God created us with purpose to do work he prepared for us in advance, and that work is now. So if they start going like, why does God have you in technology, or God have you in healthcare? And then the understanding that, okay, God owns everything. God has a plan, and your business is not the obstacle. It's actually the place. So you don't need to wait till you sell your roofing company to impact lives. You need to begin asking, well, how do I use my roofing business to impact lives, and begin to actually see people and things around you. And when those two things kind of click, like I'm not waiting to do stuff when I'm 60 or 70, and this is the place to do it. I don't have to change my place or time to do it. Those are really the critical catalyst to them kind of reimagining everything.
That's perfect. That is so good, Mike, because and I say, if we are really to love people, right, and we're to make an impact and a difference on people, where do we find people? In our workplaces, right? Yep. I mean, it's kind of, that is the place. And if you are just at home by yourself, you're not going to have that opportunity
Well,
to
and
impact.
your workplace shapes lives so much. I mean, you've got how many employees do you have?
We vacillate probably about
Okay, so you
400
have 400
now.
people. They
Yeah.
spend more time working for you than they do if they go
Yes.
to church or kind of
Yes.
religious center. And the way
Yes.
your work environment shapes those moms and dads to where they go home to their kids is more formative than pretty much anything else you're going to be part of. It's like they shape
Right.
homes and families by what you do.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. That's good. I think this is really funny. I read this that your grandmother, I think it was your
Mhm.
grandmother, that described
Oh,
C12 like an AA, like AA for CEOs, which is really funny. I think that's
yeah.
funny.
A lot of
But
a lot of my family are not necessarily Christian, and when she was like, "I'm
yeah,
trying to understand what this thing you got involved in," I went to the website and support. She's like, "It sounds like AA for Christian CEOs."
yeah. I thought that was so funny. But so much of it is, I mean, you guys have got great programming. I know you've got great content, great material, but so much of it is about
Mhm.
community, right? And getting with other like-minded, like you had said it earlier, kind of like um, almost like a
Mhm.
mastermind, for CEOs. I mean, golly, Mike, don't you see that sometimes the
Mhm.
isolation is there's such a danger in that? Don't you
Oh yeah.
agree?
No. Well, and I would say so. Ironically, I didn't have the language for it. My whole career, one of the things that's been kind of a leadership hack for me has been find other people who are wrestling with the same things and learn from them. So whether I was in technology or project management or healthcare, I'd be like,
Yes.
who else is the leaders in the space? And I'd go meet with them and say, okay, what are you guys doing? How are you thinking about things? So we could be smarter together.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
generally was viewed as more successful than I was because I just was around a lot of smart people and I was learning from them. And that's what made me successful. And then
Yes.
as you get higher and higher in leadership, you get ironically more and more isolated where everyone is coming to you. There's fewer and fewer people who you can go like be honest about what you don't.
That you can
Yeah.
go to.
And so
Right.
a
So
lot
true.
of leaders are socially oversubscribed, but yet alone in the middle of that and going, okay, who do you get to,
Mhm.
in my forum, I mean, where do you get to go and say, I don't know how to deal with this. I've never dealt with this before, or I'm wrestling with burnout or despair, or do I want to do this anymore? Or I'm wrestling with my own motives and things. Like, where do you go process that and then not freak people out
Mhm.
or get
Yeah.
bad counsel? And so I think leadership isolation is dangerous for leaders. It's not, it's common
Yeah.
and dangerous.
It is. Yeah. Could not agree more. So, whether it's C12 or another group, don't
Don't lead them.
don't do this in
Be in a peer group of
isolation.
some
So,
kind. Be surrounded by leaders who are
yeah,
challenging you, encouraging you.
for
Yeah.
for sure. You guys talk a lot about healthy
Mhm.
accountability. What do you think healthy accountability looks like? And do you guys have, I don't know, is there a tool that you guys use
Yeah.
for this? I mean, how okay, can you describe that just a little
Yeah. There's
bit?
a couple core tools we use for accountability. And I think, accountability is a word that has different meanings to different people. I was just talking with one of Patrick Lencioni's team members, and they said, when you hear the word accountability, do you think, I caught you or I've got you? Is it, I'm revealing things
Mm,
to help you or revealing things to shame you? So those can be very different things.
that's
But if
good.
accountability is trying to match up like what you know is true and say you're about versus what you do, and trying to always close that gap, we on the personal side, we use a balance wheel. So Zig Ziglar back in the 50s used to say that some people complain about a bumpy road and really it's got a flat wheel or flat tire. And his point being like
Yes.
we sometimes talk about like the categories of life, like my marriage, my health, my faith, my finances, but those are not swim lanes. Those are all parts of one being. And when any one of those is flat,
Mhm.
the whole thing has turbulence.
It's
Yeah.
wobbly.
And
That's
so we do
right.
a
Mhm.
monthly look at, hey, how is your marriage, your parenting, your walk with God, your relationship finances, your rest, your fitness, your nutrition, like all these things of whole life stewardship. And where is that out of whack? And sometimes we tell ourselves that's the price of leadership. I'm just
Mm.
unhealthy because that's what it takes to do the job, which is a pretty
Yeah.
dangerous lie. And then the other part is leaders tend to say yes to too many things. Have you ever been overcommitted before, Lisa?
Oh,
Never. Okay.
never.
You've heard about those people?
I'm totally teasing. Mike. Yeah, that's I've grown in that area. I still have a ways to go, but yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we find that the average CEO says only does about 65% of the things they say they will do because they say yes to too many
Oh,
things.
too many
And so
things,
we
right?
do a simple tracking of, hey, what's the most important things you need to do next month? And then
Mm-hmm.
define those. And then each month report out on those. We even have like a fine system. You get penalized for not doing something you said you would do.
Oh, so you actually have to pay a
It goes to
fine?
charity.
That's
It's tracked as your
awesome.
integrity score. Like, hey, do
Yeah.
like your yes be
Hmm.
yes. The
Yeah.
reality is we probably need to say no a lot more to protect our
Yeah,
yeses. But
for
just
sure.
having the feedback loop of like, how are you actually doing? What's right? What's most important in business and life right now? Are you doing things that you do? Those things begin to totally change the chemistry for a leader.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. Well, let's talk about this because I want to talk about
Okay.
Mike. Okay. And you are the CEO of C12. You've got all of these leaders who are depending on you that you're pouring into. What are some of the rhythms and disciplines that keep you grounded, Mike Sharrow? Um, and I would love for you to talk about this because I read this about you, the blue
Mm.
marble practice. And can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? I love
Yeah.
that.
So at the end of the day, I think the thing we are all going to be held accountable for is what we did with our life. I'm all about
Yes.
generosity and getting money away, but that's just one currency. And at the end of the day, we've all got time and it's limited. So when I turned 30, my wife gave me a glass cylinder with a blue marble of every week of life expectancy I'd left. And every Saturday night since then, I do this ritual where I move a marble from the available column to the empty cylinder and they're shifting, right? The ratio is shifting. And it's a moment for me to realize like I just spent the one thing I can't get more of, and that's time. What
Yeah.
about this past week will matter 5 years from now, 10 years from now, at the end of my life? The reality is a lot of the things that were stressful in a week or even successful in a week fade away within weeks or months or years. And
Sure.
not that you neglect those things, but just for me is a constant reorientation. Be like, I want to be on purpose. I want to live a life that matters. And what do I need to fix next week to do more of that? And so for me,
Mhm.
the things that anchor me, Buck Jacobs actually, I had always been someone who like read the Bible off and on and did a bunch of studies, but I didn't have a consistent quiet time. And he is like the godfather. In fact, he has a website called themostimportanthour.com where he just loves discipling people into how to have the first hour of your day be an intimate time with the Father. And he
Mm.
challenged me to stop being so casual about it and willy nilly. That every day, I now on my calendar, I classify as the owner's meeting because I want to protect it
Uh,
just like I wouldn't bump a investor meeting or a meeting
yeah.
with Lisa Nichols. I wouldn't bump meeting with a VIP. I shouldn't miss time with the creator of the universe. And
Amen.
then Sabbath, I didn't start doing that till about 8 years ago and actually having a true 24-hour period of time where I don't do emails or texts or calls and I don't do business at all. And I actually trust that God holds the world together, not me. That's actually
Mhm.
really hard to do because I self justify so many compromises on that. But I didn't really learn to Sabbath until about 8 years ago.
So you really do
I,
Sabbath? I mean, where you turn off the email, you're not working, you're spending time with family, you're resting, going to church, doing whatever it is, but you're not. I just had this conversation yesterday with a friend, and she asked me, she goes, "Are you honoring the Sabbath?" And I said, I worked, I said, I only worked
yeah,
1 hour
yeah, yeah.
on this. So I'm getting better, but it's why don't we? It's a commandment.
It's a
It's one of the 10 commandments, right? Why don't we trust
mhm.
that? Well, why don't we trust it? And, I love that. Those are great rhythms, and I love the blue marble, story because, yeah, my friend, Sean Copeland, who
I know
you
Sean
might
well.
know.
Yeah.
Sean, so good, and he started the 94X, but, we have, what, 168 hours in
Hmm.
the week, right? That's everybody's given the same, but, yeah, I love that you are being intentional with that, and I think sometimes, Mike, and I'm speaking to myself here, as well, but we don't take the time to do what you
Yeah.
do, and that is be intentional and step back and really reflect on how did we do this week, and I think that's so important, such a important rhythm.
Yeah. And then I'm in a group myself, and I try to surround myself with accountability. And I think going back to purpose, like I've worked through, like I know why I exist, and I try to constantly go like, okay, how
Yes.
do I live who God's made me to be today?
Yes. Yeah, so good. All right. We could keep going and going and going, but I told you we're gonna try to wrap it up about this time. This is called Something
Mm-hmm.
Extra, and I ask every leader, what do you believe is the something extra every leader needs, Mike?
I think every leader needs the extra of clarity about who you are uniquely made to be, and what may be hijacking that. I've had a number
Mm,
of leaders help call out where there's dirty fuel, or there's shadows or wounds or things that are kind of hijacking and making you pose or try to be kind of contortions of that. But if you can be really clear about like, hey, this is who God has made me to be, it also makes you more freed up to go, and how do I try to call out who someone else is uniquely made to be, and go like, we actually need the diversity of that. But if I
yeah,
I use all sorts of tools. I talked about encouraging, wish we were younger and did, DISC, get Myers-Briggs, and know all the stuff. I just did that for my
yes,
kids recently. I created like a 15-page manual for each
good.
of them, like, hey, here's who God made you to be. But I think in all that, for all of us as leaders, there's a unique talent God's given us to steward that we have to show up and use it. There's also a tax that other people pay that we're often blind to. That's the wake we lead by our gift set, and there can be a temptation to overindulge. And so I'm constantly trying to refine, like, am I using my gift? Am I minimizing the tax other people pay for it? And where's the
Mhm.
blind spot I can guard? And as those things kind of hone in, I feel like that just keeps unleashing the unique, Ephesians 2:10 gift God's made me for, made all of us
Yeah,
for.
absolutely. The something
Something
extra.
extra.
That God places in every person, or many something extras in some cases. That is so good. Well, Mike, this has been so much fun. I knew it would be, but I just appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and I know that it's going to help our listeners. And I know that Mike is speaking in Florida tomorrow, and this is a practice that we didn't talk about, but he's taken one of his
Yes.
daughters, and I think that is a wonderful practice that maybe some of our listeners might,
Bring your kids to business. Bring your
start
kids
start
along.
thinking about.
Yes.
Bring your kids to, yes, but bring your kids with you, and you never know what they're gonna absorb and take away from, those experiences. So, thanks a lot, Mike. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a blessed rest of the day, my friend.
You too, Lisa.
Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. To learn more about this week's guest, check out the show notes at tpi.co/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving us a review. Thank you for listening to Something Extra.